The sterile white walls of my hospital room seemed to mock me, reflecting the coldness that had seeped into my own family. "I can't come now, Mom," Merrick, my son, said on the phone, his voice tinged with impatience. "Belle's at yoga, and Bruno needs his walk." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. "Merrick, darling," I began, my voice a frail whisper. "The doctor said it's not good." A pause. Then, "Look, Mom, I'll try to swing by tomorrow, okay? Bruno gets anxious if he misses his evening constitutional." Constitutional. My son was more concerned about his dog's bowel movements than his dying mother. "All right, dear," I managed, a lump forming in my throat. "Good night." I hung up, the dial tone a hollow echo of the emptiness that had settled in my chest. My gaze drifted to the window, the city lights blurring through the film of tears in my eyes. Eleanor, my daughter, had called earlier, her voice full of concern from across the ocean. "Mom, I'm booking a flight," she'd insisted. "Julian and I will be there as soon as we can." Eleanor and her fiancé, Julian, were the only ones who seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. "Sweetheart, there's no need to disrupt your lives," I'd told her, though a part of me longed for their presence. "We'll see how things progress." But deep down, I knew things wouldn't progress. The doctor's words, delivered with a gentle yet unwavering certainty, echoed in my mind. Weeks, maybe a month, if we're lucky. A month to mend broken bridges, to say unspoken words, to feel the warmth of family one last time. Yet here I was alone, my only son prioritizing a dog walk over what might be our final goodbye. The thought stung, a sharp, bitter taste in my mouth. I closed my eyes, willing the tears away. The image of Merrick strolling along the park path with Bruno, oblivious to my fading existence, playing on repeat in my mind. I thought of Eleanor, across the ocean, her worry palpable even over the phone. She'd always been the more sensitive one, attuned to the unspoken emotions rippling beneath the surface of our family. A sudden wave of exhaustion washed over me, a bone-deep weariness that settled in my limbs. I shifted in the uncomfortable hospital bed, the crisp white sheets suddenly feeling like a shroud. What was the point? What was the point of clinging to hope when the people I loved most seemed so indifferent to my fate? A flicker of defiance ignited within me, a tiny spark in the vast darkness of despair. Perhaps it was time to stop expecting, to stop hoping, to stop clinging. Perhaps it was time to take control. I reached for the bedside table, my fingers fumbling for the small notebook and pen I kept tucked away. My hand trembled as I flipped open the notebook to a blank page. The words flowed onto the paper, hesitant at first, then gaining momentum, each stroke of the pen a small act of rebellion against the loneliness that threatened to consume me. I wrote to Eleanor, pouring out my heart, sharing the doctor's prognosis, but also expressing a newfound sense of purpose, a strange calm amidst the storm. I wrote of a plan, a secret I would keep from Merrick for now, a way to reclaim the last precious days of my life. The next morning, the hospital room felt brighter, the sterile white walls less oppressive. A nurse bustled in, her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the gloom that had permeated the room the night before. "Good morning, Mrs. Davies," she chirped. "How are we feeling today?" "Better," I replied, a genuine smile gracing my lips for the first time in days. Much better. The nurse looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "That's wonderful to hear," she said, then proceeded with her routine checks. As she worked, I kept my gaze fixed on the small, worn photograph tucked into the frame on the bedside table. It was a picture of Eleanor and me, taken on her graduation day. Her radiant smile, full of promise and hope, reflected back at me, a silent reminder of the love that still existed in the world, a love that transcended the disappointments of family. I thought of the letter I'd slipped into my bedside drawer, addressed to Eleanor, a letter that contained the key to my escape, my quiet revenge. A seed of anticipation began to bloom in my chest, a whisper of excitement for the future, a future I would carve out for myself, a future where my worth would be measured not by the attention I received, but by the peace I found within. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of purpose, a sense of control, and that, I realized, was more valuable than any amount of familial obligation. Merrick might have Bruno, but I had a secret, and that secret was my lifeline. Fluorescent lights buzzed above me, a dull counterpoint to the throbbing ache in my chest. Eleanor called earlier, her voice brittle with forced cheer. "Julian and I are just about to take Buster for a walk, Mum. The fresh air will do us good. We'll pop in tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow." That word echoed in the sterile silence of my hospital room. Tomorrow, when the tests might confirm what I already knew. Tomorrow, when the doctor's somber face might finally give voice to the fear that gnawed at my gut. And Merrick, my son, wouldn't be here. He wouldn't be here today or tomorrow. Not until it was convenient. Not until after his dog had its evening constitutional. "Of course, darling," I'd managed, my voice thinner than I intended. "Enjoy your walk." I lowered the phone, the cool plastic a stark contrast to the hot tears that welled in my eyes. The digital clock on the bedside table blinked 7:48 p.m. Visiting hours were almost over, but I hadn't seen a single visitor all day, not even Merrick. I knew he was busy, juggling work and his new life with Eleanor, but surely he could spare an hour for his mother, especially now. A wave of nausea rolled over me, a familiar companion these past few weeks. I fumbled for the sickness bag, the plastic rustling in my trembling hands. This wasn't how I envisioned my life, lying here alone, abandoned by the people I loved most. I'd always prided myself on being a strong, independent woman. I raised Merrick single-handedly, working 2 jobs to provide for him, sacrificing my own dreams so he could chase his. And what had it all been for? A choked sob escaped my lips. I closed my eyes, picturing Merrick as a little boy, his gap-toothed grin and infectious laughter. He used to cling to my hand, his small fingers wrapped tightly round mine. Where had that little boy gone? When had he become this distant, preoccupied man who couldn't even find the time to visit his ailing mother? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, a silent indictment of our fractured relationship. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the void, a steady pulse against the chaos in my mind. I opened my eyes, staring blankly at the ceiling. The sterile white expanse seemed to mock my emptiness, reflecting the hollowness that had settled deep within me. I thought about Eleanor, her bright eyes and bubbly personality. She was a lovely girl, and I genuinely liked her. But there was a part of me, a small, resentful voice, that whispered she'd stolen my son, stolen his time, his attention, his affection. I squeezed my eyes shut again, trying to silence that insidious voice. It wasn't fair to Eleanor. She was just trying to build a life with the man she loved, and Merrick, well, he was an adult. He had his own life, his own priorities. I had no right to demand his time, his attention. But the hurt, the deep, gnawing ache of loneliness, wouldn't be silenced. It pulsed through me, a constant reminder of my isolation. The door creaked open, and a young nurse bustled in, her face etched with a tired smile. "How are we feeling tonight, Mrs. Davies?" She adjusted the foredrip, her movements practiced and efficient. "Any pain?" "Just a little," I murmured, forcing a smile. "Nothing I can't handle." I didn't want to burden her with my emotional turmoil. She had enough to deal with. "Good to hear," she chirped. "Just press the call button if you need anything. Visiting hours are over now, so it'll be nice and quiet. Quiet." The word echoed in my ears. Quiet was the last thing I wanted. I craved noise, laughter, the comforting presence of someone who cared, someone who would hold my hand and tell me everything would be all right. But there was only the quiet hum of the machines, the sterile silence of the hospital room, and the growing realization that I was utterly and completely alone. As the nurse left, I reached for the small bedside table, my fingers brushing against a photograph of Merrick and me. It was taken on his graduation day, his face beaming with pride, my arm wrapped tightly round his shoulders. I picked up the frame, tracing the outline of his youthful features with my fingertips. A fresh wave of tears blurred my vision as I whispered a silent prayer, a prayer not for healing, not for recovery, but for strength. The strength to accept the truth, the strength to face the future, whatever it may hold, and perhaps, just perhaps, the strength to find a way out of this desolate loneliness. Something inside me shifted, a tiny spark of defiance igniting in the ashes of my despair. I placed the photograph back on the table, a flicker of resolve hardening my gaze. I wouldn't let this be the end of my story. I still had a life to live, even if it wouldn't be the one I'd imagined. I would find a way. I had to. The sterile hum of the hospital room machinery seemed to mock the hollow ache in my chest. I watched the rhythmic rise and fall of my own chest, a stark reminder of the fragility I'd been trying to deny. The bedside phone felt cold and impersonal in my hand, yet it held the key to my escape. "Hello, Agnes," I whispered, my voice raspy from disuse. "It's me. I've made a decision." Agnes had been a friend of mine for years, a beacon of strength and practicality in a world that increasingly felt like quicksand. She ran the Sunnybrook Children's Home, a place I'd visited many times, donating my time and resources. Now, it represented something entirely different, a lifeline. "Oh, darling, how are you feeling?" Agnes's voice, warm with concern, filled the small room. I hesitated, gathering my thoughts. This was a leap of faith, a radical departure from the life I'd known. "Not well, Agnes," I admitted. "Not well at all. I need to talk to you about something important. Something I need your help with." A deep breath steadied me. I want to come to Sunnybrook, to live. Silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the beeping of the machines. Live, Agnes finally echoed, her voice laced with disbelief. But your family, Eleanor and Julian? Surely. I closed my eyes, the familiar sting of tears threatening to break through. They won't even notice I'm gone, I said, the words heavier than lead. Eleanor's wrapped up in her wedding plans, and Julian, well, he's always been more interested in his own pursuits. The thought of Eleanor's upcoming wedding, an event I'd envisioned sharing with her, brought a fresh wave of pain. I'd imagined helping her choose her dress, planning the reception, sharing those precious mother-daughter moments. Instead, I was lying here, alone, my absence likely to be greeted with a shrug rather than concern. Eleanor called earlier, I told Agnes, the words catching in my throat. She said she and Julian were going to postpone their visit again. Something about a dog show Julian didn't want to miss. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. The dog show. More important than seeing her mother, perhaps for the last time. Oh, honey, Agnes murmured, her voice filled with sympathy. I'm so sorry. I could almost feel her embrace through the phone. I understand, I said, my voice trembling. It's just hit me how little I truly matter to them. I'm just in the way. The admission, raw and painful, hung in the air. Don't say that, Agnes countered firmly. You matter. You matter a great deal. Not to them, I whispered. The truth a bitter pill to swallow. They have their own lives, their own priorities. I'm just excess baggage. A choked sob escaped me. Agnes, I don't want to die here, alone and forgotten. I want to spend what time I have left somewhere I feel needed, somewhere I can make a difference. Another long silence followed. Then Agnes's voice, resolute and clear, broke through. All right, darling, she said. Let's make this happen. I'll start making arrangements. When do you think you'll be ready to come? Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit. A glimmer of hope, faint but persistent, began to flicker within me. As soon as possible, I replied, a newfound strength coursing through my veins. The sooner the better. We talked for a while longer, discussing the practicalities of my move. Agnes assured me there was a room waiting for me, a place where I could find peace and purpose. We spoke about the children at Sunnybrook, their bright eyes and infectious laughter, and for the first time in a long time, a genuine smile touched my lips. Perhaps, just perhaps, this wouldn't be the end. Perhaps this was a new beginning. After ending the call, I lay back against the pillows, a strange sense of calm washing over me. The hospital room, once a symbol of my loneliness and despair, now felt different. It was no longer a prison, but a temporary way station. I looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance, a silent promise of the life that awaited me. I knew there were still hurdles to overcome, difficult conversations to be had. I knew I would need to confront Eleanor and Julian, to explain my decision, to finally sever the ties that had become more like shackles. But for now, in the quiet solitude of the night, I allowed myself to dream of a future where I was surrounded by laughter, by love, by a sense of belonging, a future where I mattered. The thought of Sunnybrook, of the children waiting there, filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. It was a flicker of hope in the darkness, a promise of a life yet to be lived. I closed my eyes, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek. This time, it wasn't a tear of sadness, but of quiet resolve. I was leaving, and I wasn't looking back. The sterile white of the hospital room seemed to mock me, reflecting the emptiness I felt inside. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting a rectangle of warmth on the floor, but I felt no comfort. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the pen, the cheap plastic cold against my skin. "Dear Merrick," I wrote, the words forming slowly on the page. I paused, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on me. How could I explain the chasm that had opened between us? How could I convey the pain of his indifference? "I'm writing to let you know I've made some decisions about my future," I continued, each word a carefully placed stone in a wall I was building between us. Decisions that affect us both. I set the pen down, my fingers stiff. The silence in the room amplified the pounding in my ears. The rhythmic beeping of the machines monitoring my vitals was a stark reminder of my own mortality. It was a cruel irony that the machines seemed to care more about my well-being than my own son. I closed my eyes, a wave of dizziness washing over me. When I opened them again, I saw the blurry outline of the get well card Eleanor had sent. "Get well soon, Mom," it chirped, decorated with cheerful cartoon flowers. The sentiment felt hollow, a stark contrast to the reality of my situation. I reached for the water jug on the bedside table, my hand shaking so badly I almost spilled it. I forced myself to take a slow, deep breath. This wasn't how I envisioned my life ending. I always pictured myself surrounded by family, loved ones holding my hand, sharing stories and laughter. Instead, I was alone, abandoned in this sterile room. My only companions the whirring machines and the ghosts of memories. I picked up the pen again and continued writing. "I won't be returning home. I've made arrangements to live elsewhere, somewhere I can receive the care and attention I need." The words felt cold and formal, but they were the truth. I couldn't bear to return to that house, a constant reminder of Merrick's neglect. The thought of seeing Julian's condescending smile, hearing Eleanor's empty platitudes, made my stomach churn. "I understand this might come as a surprise," I wrote, a bitter taste rising in my throat. Surprise. He probably wouldn't even notice I was gone until the dog needed walking. The memory of Merrick rushing out of the hospital, his excuse about needing to walk the dog echoing in my ears, made me clench my jaw. "Don't worry about me," I continued, the words dripping with irony. "I'll be fine." I knew I wouldn't be fine. I was scared, uncertain about the future, but I couldn't allow myself to dwell on those fears. I needed to be strong for myself. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. I addressed it to Merrick, my hand lingering on his name. A part of me, a small, flickering ember of hope, still yearned for his love and attention, but I knew deep down that it was a futile hope. He had made his choice, and now, so had I. I reached for the call button, my finger hovering over it. I needed to speak to the nurse, finalize the arrangements. It was time to leave this place, this chapter of my life, behind. I pressed the button, the soft chime echoing in the room. As I waited for the nurse to arrive, my gaze fell on a small, framed photograph on the bedside table. It was a picture of Merrick as a child, his gap-toothed grin radiating pure joy. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the outline of his small face. The memories flooded back, a bittersweet tide of love and loss. Had I done something wrong? Had I failed him in some way? The questions gnawed at me, but there were no easy answers. The nurse entered the room, her cheerful smile a jarring contrast to the turmoil within me. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," she said. "How are we feeling today?" I managed a weak smile. "Ready to move on," I replied, my voice stronger than I expected. The nurse looked surprised, but quickly recovered. "That's wonderful news," she said. "I'll let the doctor know." I watched her leave, a strange sense of calm settling over me. It wasn't the peace I had always envisioned, but it was a start. It was a chance to rebuild my life, to find a new purpose, a new sense of belonging. I glanced at the letter addressed to Merrick, lying on the bedside table. I knew he wouldn't understand. He wouldn't see the pain he had caused, the quiet desperation that had led me to this decision. But that was no longer my concern. My focus now was on the future, on finding a place where I could finally be at peace. And I had a feeling, a growing certainty, that I would find it, somewhere far from this sterile room, far from the indifference that had shrouded my life in shadows, somewhere I could finally bloom again, like a flower pushing through the cracks in the pavement, reaching for the sun. The details were still hazy, the path ahead uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a flicker of anticipation. I knew deep in my heart that something beautiful was waiting for me just beyond the horizon. The sterile white walls of the hospital room seemed to mock me, reflecting the emptiness I felt inside. I pressed the call button, a small plastic lifeline in a sea of indifference. A young nurse, her name tag read Beth, bustled in, her smile strained. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Davies?" she asked, her hand hovering over my chart. "Yes, dear," I replied, my voice thinner than I intended. "I have a letter here for my son, Merrick. Could you ensure he receives it when he finally visits?" The slight tremor in my voice betrayed me, but Beth, bless her heart, pretended not to notice. "Of course," she said gently, taking the envelope. "I'll put it in his designated slot." I watched her go, the stark white door clicking shut behind her, sealing me back into my solitary world. The silence that followed was deafening. It amplified the hollowness that had taken root within me, a slow-growing ache that had finally blossomed into full-blown despair. Merrick hadn't visited in days. His excuses, relayed through his wife Eleanor, echoed in my mind: work deadlines, a sick dog, Eleanor's prior engagement, each one a tiny pinprick, deflating the last vestiges of hope that my only son cared about me. Julian, Eleanor's fiancé, had called once, a brief, perfunctory conversation filled with strained pleasantries and hurried goodbyes. I closed my eyes, willing myself not to cry. The tears came anyway, hot and bitter. I reached for the remote and flicked on the television, the mindless chatter, welcome distraction from my thoughts. The news droned on about the latest political scandal, the weather forecast predicting sunshine, the world continuing on as if nothing were amiss. And perhaps, for everyone else, nothing was. But for me, my world had crumbled. The foundation upon which I had built my life, family, love, Belonging had eroded away, leaving me adrift in a sea of loneliness. I spent the rest of the day staring out the window, watching the city bustle below. The tiny figures hurrying along the sidewalks seemed so full of purpose, their lives intertwined with others, a vibrant tapestry of connections. I longed to be a part of that tapestry again, to feel the warmth of human connection, to know that I mattered to someone. But the truth was, I was alone. Merrick, my own flesh and blood, had chosen his new life over me, his ailing mother. The realization was a sharp, stinging blow. The afternoon stretched into evening, the sky outside painting itself in hues of orange and purple. The nurses came and went, their cheerful greetings a stark contrast to the bleakness I felt. Dinner arrived, a tasteless concoction of overcooked vegetables and rubbery chicken. I picked at it listlessly, my appetite gone. I wasn't hungry for food. I was hungry for love, for companionship, for a reason to keep going. As darkness descended, I turned off the television, the silence no longer a source of torment but a strange comfort. In the quiet stillness of the room, I began to think, really think, about my future. What did I have to look forward to? More days spent staring at these sterile walls, waiting for a visit that might never come. More hollow excuses relayed through a third party. The thought filled me with a sudden, unexpected surge of anger. It was a quiet anger, a simmering resentment. But it was there, and with it came a newfound resolve. I wouldn't let Merrick define my final days. I wouldn't let his indifference extinguish the last flicker of life within me. I deserved more. I spent the next few hours formulating a plan, a quiet rebellion against the life that had been imposed upon me. It was a simple plan, but it filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. I wouldn't tell Merrick. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing. I would simply slip away, quietly and discreetly, and rebuild my life on my own terms. The thought brought a faint smile to my lips. The next morning, I woke with a sense of calm determination. I knew what I had to do. After Beth delivered my breakfast, I casually inquired about the children's home I had researched online. "It's a lovely place," Beth replied, her eyes softening with understanding. "They do wonderful work with the children there." Her words confirmed my decision. This was where I belonged. This was where I could find the purpose and connection I craved. I spent the rest of the morning making arrangements, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The future stretched before me, no longer a bleak expanse of loneliness, but a path filled with possibility. I knew that leaving without a word would hurt Merrick, perhaps even shock him, but the thought didn't bring me satisfaction, not the kind of vengeful glee I might have expected. It simply brought a quiet sense of closure. I had given him my love, my time, my life, and in return, he had offered indifference. Now, it was time for me to choose myself. The small, tightly packed bag under my bed held more than just clothes. It held the promise of a new beginning, a life lived on my own terms, a quiet revenge against the son who had forgotten me. The letter I'd given Beth was short, merely stating my intention to leave and asking him not to look for me. The details of my new life would remain my secret, a small private victory in the face of his neglect. The faint scent of antiseptic filled the air, a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. But I no longer felt trapped within these sterile walls. I was free. The crisp afternoon sun streamed through the hospital window, painting a rectangle of warmth on the sterile floor. "You're free to go, Mrs. Peterson," the nurse said, a kind smile softening her words. "All signed and ready for discharge." I nodded, a small, tight smile forming on my lips. "Thank you," I managed, my voice a little raspy from disuse. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, feeling surprisingly strong considering I'd been confined to this room for weeks. The nurse helped me into a wheelchair, a gesture I accepted with a silent nod. "Just a short ride to the front entrance," she explained. "Someone there to pick you up?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Yes," I said. "Someone will be there." I hadn't told Eleanor or Julian about my discharge. Not yet. In fact, they believed I was still quite ill, still confined to this bed. Let them think that, I thought. Let them continue their lives blissfully ignorant. The cool air of the hospital lobby felt bracing against my skin. As promised, a car waited. Not the familiar family sedan Eleanor usually drove, but a sleek, black town car I'd prearranged. "Mrs. Peterson," the driver asked, opening the passenger door for me. "That's me," I confirmed. Stepping inside, the leather seats were soft and cool. As the car pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the imposing hospital building, a lump forming in my throat. It wasn't sadness I felt, but a strange sense of detachment, of finality. The ride was short, but each block we traveled felt like another step away from the life I once knew. I directed the driver to the storage facility where I discreetly moved a few essential belongings over the past few weeks. Clothes, a few sentimental items, the building blocks of a new beginning. "Wait here for me, please," I told the driver as he parked. Inside, I quickly retrieved a small suitcase and a sturdy box filled with photographs and letters, tangible memories of a life I was choosing to leave behind. Back in the car, I gave the driver the final address. Not Eleanor's house. Not the home I'd shared with my children for so many years. This address was different, a place Eleanor and Julian knew nothing about. The car glided to a stop in front of a charming, two-story building surrounded by a vibrant garden. Children's laughter drifted from the open windows, a sound that warmed me from the inside out. This was Meadowbrook House, a children's home nestled in the quiet suburbs, a place I had discovered during my long hospital stay. I had volunteered here years ago, before my illness, before the world narrowed to the confines of my home and the growing indifference of my children. Now, I was returning, not as a volunteer, but as a resident. The driver helped me with my belongings, his face a mask of polite curiosity. "Thank you," I said, handing him a generous tip. "You've been very helpful." He touched his cap and drove away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, gazing up at the house. Taking a deep breath, I walked towards the entrance, the sound of children's laughter beckoning me forward. Inside, the air buzzed with activity. Children raced down the hallway, their faces bright with excitement. A kind-faced woman with warm brown eyes greeted me at the reception desk. "Mrs. Peterson," she exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine welcome. "We're so glad you're here." This was Ms. Evans, the director of Meadowbrook House. We had spoken on the phone numerous times over the past few weeks, arranging my arrival, discussing the details of my residency. She led me to a small, cozy room overlooking the garden, sunlight streaming in through the window. "This is yours," she said, a gentle smile on her face. "Make yourself comfortable." The room was simple, but clean and inviting. A small bed, a dresser, a comfortable armchair by the window. It was perfect. I thanked Ms. Evans and began unpacking my meager belongings, a sense of calm settling over me. As I arranged the photographs on the dresser, my fingers lingered on a picture of Eleanor and Julian, their faces beaming with happiness on their wedding day. I felt a pang of sadness, a fleeting moment of regret, but it quickly passed. I had made my decision. I had chosen a different path, a path that led me here, to this place filled with laughter and light. Later that evening, after a delicious dinner with the children and staff, I sat in my room, writing a letter to Eleanor and Julian. It was a short letter, a simple explanation of my decision to move to Meadowbrook House. I didn't offer excuses, nor did I ask for forgiveness. I simply stated my intention to live out the remainder of my days in a place where I felt valued, where I could contribute, where I could find peace. I sealed the letter in an envelope and addressed it to Eleanor, knowing she would share it with Julian. I planned to mail it tomorrow, a final goodbye to the life I was leaving behind. As I placed the letter on the dresser, I glanced out the window at the darkening sky. The first stars were beginning to appear, twinkling like diamonds against the velvet canvas. I felt a sense of contentment, a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. This was my home now. This was where I belonged. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. I closed my eyes, a soft smile playing on my lips. Tomorrow, I would start my new life, a life filled with purpose and meaning, a life far away from the shadows of neglect and indifference. The children's laughter echoed in the distance, a sweet lullaby that eased me into a peaceful sleep. The cab meter clicked steadily upward, a counterpoint to the thump of my own heart. To the Sunnyside Children's Home. "Please," I'd told the driver, my voice steadier than I'd expected. Each block that fell away from the hospital felt like another link severed from the life I'd known, the life where my own daughter, Eleanor, and her fiancé, Julian, had deemed me an inconvenience, a burden. "Almost there, Mum," the driver said, his voice a gentle rumble. I glanced out the window, the cityscape blurring into a watercolor of greens and browns as we left the concrete jungle behind. The air itself seemed to change, losing its hospital sterility and taking on a sweeter, almost floral scent. I leaned my head against the cool glass, the rhythmic whoosh of passing cars a lullaby against the backdrop of my thoughts. It was a gamble, this, leaving without a word, without a backward glance. Just a little further, the driver confirmed, as if reading my mind. But what choice did I have? Eleanor had made it painfully clear where I stood in her priorities. Her wedding plans, Julian's endless demands, the dog's grooming appointments, everything came before a visit to her ailing mother. The car slowed, pulling up to a wrought iron gate adorned with cheerful, hand-painted sunflowers. "Here we are," the driver announced. I paid the fare, adding a generous tip. He offered a kind smile. "Hope everything goes well for you, ma'am." His words, so simple yet so sincere, brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. As he pulled away, I turned to face the gate. A woman with warm, welcoming eyes and a kind smile emerged from the building beyond. "You must be Mrs. Davies," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Sarah, the director here." Her grip was firm, reassuring. "We've been expecting you." Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit. Expected. Someone was expecting me. "It's lovely here," I said, taking in the vibrant flower beds and the sound of children's laughter drifting from the playground. Come in," Sarah said, gesturing towards the building. "Let me show you round." The interior was just as cheerful as the outside, filled with colorful artwork and the comforting hum of activity. Children rushed past, their faces alight with joy, calling out greetings to Sarah. She introduced me to a few of them, and their innocent curiosity and genuine warmth brought a smile to my face for the first time in days. Sarah led me to a small, sun-drenched room overlooking the garden. "This will be your room," she said, opening the door. "We've tried to make it as comfortable as possible." The room was simple but cozy, with a comfortable armchair by the window and a small bookshelf filled with classic novels. A vase of fresh flowers sat on the bedside table, their fragrance filling the air. "It's perfect," I whispered, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. This wasn't the life I'd envisioned for myself, not at all, but in this unexpected haven, surrounded by the vibrant energy of children and the kindness of strangers, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this new chapter would be even more fulfilling than the one I'd left behind. "Lunch will be served in about an hour," Sarah said, interrupting my thoughts. "Why don't you settle in, and I'll come and get you when it's ready." I nodded, a genuine smile finally gracing my lips. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, meaning it from the bottom of my heart. As she left, I walked over to the window and looked out at the children playing in the garden. Their laughter was a melody that resonated deep within me, a soothing counterpoint to the silence that had echoed in my hospital room. I thought of Eleanor, of Julian, of the life I'd left behind. A pang of sadness, a flicker of anger still lingered, but they were fading, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation. I opened the small suitcase I'd brought with me, carefully unpacking the few personal belongings I'd managed to salvage from my old life. A framed photograph of Eleanor as a child, her eyes sparkling with mischief. A worn copy of my favorite poetry book. A small velvet pouch containing a single, exquisite pearl necklace, a gift from my late husband. These were the treasures I'd clung to, the remnants of a past that was now behind me. But as I placed them on the bedside table, I realized they weren't just reminders of what I'd lost. They were symbols of what I still had. Memories, resilience, and the capacity to love. The setting sun cast long shadows across the garden, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. The children's laughter drifted through the open window, a gentle lullaby that eased my weary soul. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was free, and I had a feeling that this new life, this unexpected haven, held more riches than I could ever have imagined. The thought of Eleanor's reaction to my disappearance, to the emptiness she'd find where she expected me to be, a flicker of something akin to satisfaction danced at the edges of my awareness. It was a small, quiet victory, but a victory nonetheless. Sunlight streamed through the large windows of St. Agnes, illuminating the colorful murals painted on the walls. I took a deep breath, the air fresh with the scent of crayons and freshly baked cookies. A kind-faced woman with a warm smile approached me. "You must be Mrs. Davies," she said, extending her hand. "We've been expecting you. I'm Sister Agnes, and welcome to St. Agnes." Her grip was firm, her eyes full of genuine welcome. I returned the smile, a small, tentative one, and followed her into the bustling heart of the home. Children, of all ages, were everywhere. Some were playing with building blocks, others drawing at tables, and a small group sat captivated by a story being read aloud in a cozy corner. The atmosphere was vibrant, a stark contrast to the sterile quiet of the hospital room I'd recently left. "It's lively," I managed, the word a small puff of air in the cheerful din. "It is," Sister Agnes agreed, chuckling softly. "But it's a good kind of lively, wouldn't you say?" I nodded, my gaze drifting towards a little girl with bright pigtails who was meticulously stacking blocks, her brow furrowed in concentration. "They seem happy," I commented. "We try our best to make it a happy place," Sister Agnes replied, her voice soft. "A place where they feel safe, loved, and cared for." She led me down a hallway, past more classrooms and play areas, each filled with the happy sounds of children. "We have a small apartment prepared for you, Mrs. Davies," she explained. "It's quiet, away from the main activity areas, so you can have some peace and quiet when you need it." "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate to express the immense gratitude swelling within me. The apartment was small, but cozy, with a comfortable armchair by the window overlooking a small garden. Sunlight filtered through the leaves of a large oak tree, dappling the floor with light. "It's lovely," I breathed, genuinely touched. "Make yourself at home," Sister Agnes said warmly. "Lunch will be served in the main dining hall in about an hour. We have a lovely cook who makes the most delicious meals. The children adore her." The next few days passed in a blur of new experiences. I helped out in the library, shelving books and reading stories to the younger children. I joined the art class, surprised to find a dormant creativity reawakening within me. I even helped in the kitchen, peeling vegetables and chatting with the cook, a jovial woman named Mrs. O'Malley. "You have a good hand with pastry, you know," she'd told me one afternoon, as I crimped the edges of an apple pie. "Unnatural," her words, simple and kind, filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "Eleanor called," Sister Agnes said one afternoon, as I was watering the plants in the small courtyard garden. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't spoken to Eleanor or Julian since I'd left the hospital. She seemed concerned. Sister Agnes continued hesitantly. "She said she'd tried calling you at the hospital, but you'd already been discharged. I left a letter," I explained quietly, my hands stilling on the watering can. "I told her I was moving on." Sister Agnes nodded, her expression unreadable. "She asked for your new address," she said gently. I hesitated, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over me. part of me wanted to tell Eleanor where I was, to explain everything. But another part of me, a harder, colder part, held back. Tell her I'll contact her when I'm ready, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Sister Agnes nodded again, her gaze filled with understanding. Of course, she said softly. Take your time. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. I found a rhythm at St. Agnes, a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I craved. I woke each morning to the sounds of children's laughter, spent my days surrounded by their boundless energy and infectious joy. I helped with homework, organized games, and listened to their endless stories, each one filled with the kind of innocent wonder I hadn't experienced in years. One evening, as I sat by the window of my apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, Sister Agnes knocked on my door. You have a visitor, she announced, a knowing smile playing on her lips. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew, instinctively, who it was. Eleanor stood in the doorway, looking hesitant and a little lost. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but her usual composure seemed to have deserted her. Mom, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't understand. I gestured for her to come in, my own emotions a confusing mix of apprehension and relief. I read your letter, she continued, her eyes welling up with tears. I read it over and over, trying to understand why. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Julian and we thought we were doing the right thing. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. We thought you wanted peace and quiet, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We didn't realize, we didn't understand how much you needed us. I looked at her, at the genuine pain in her eyes, and felt a softening within me. The anger, the resentment that had been simmering within me for so long began to dissipate. Perhaps they hadn't understood. Perhaps, in their own way, they had been trying to do what they thought was best. I've found peace here, Eleanor, I said softly, my voice filled with a quiet strength, a different kind of peace. I looked around the small, cozy apartment, at the framed drawings by the children hanging on the walls, at the small potted plant on the windowsill, a gift from one of the little girls. I've found a purpose. Eleanor looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the children's artwork. It's different, she murmured. It's good, I replied, a genuine smile finally reaching my lips. It's good. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes still filled with tears, but now there was a glimmer of understanding in them. Can I come visit again? She asked hesitantly. I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me. Of course, I said. You're always welcome. And as I looked at my daughter, standing in the doorway of my new home, surrounded by the echoes of children's laughter, I knew that I had finally found the place where I truly belonged. The sting of their initial neglect, the pain of their thoughtlessness, began to fade, replaced by a quiet hope, a burgeoning sense of peace, and a deep, unwavering love for the new family I had found. The scent of cinnamon and sugar drifted from the kitchen at St. Agnes, mingling with the happy shrieks of children playing tag in the hallway. I smiled, watching them dart past my doorway, their energy infectious. Mrs. Davies, more story, please, a small voice piped up. It was Lily, clutching a well-loved teddy bear. Just one more chapter, she pleaded, her big brown eyes wide with anticipation. Of course, sweetheart, I said, scooping her onto my lap. She snuggled in close, the teddy bear pressed between us, and I opened the book, my voice taking on the lilting cadence of a storyteller. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, reading to the children had become a nightly ritual, a quiet moment of connection amidst the bustling activity of the home. It wasn't just the stories that captivated them. It was the shared warmth, the feeling of being held and heard. And for me, it was a balm, a gentle reminder that I was needed, that I had a purpose. I thought back to the sterile silence of the hospital room, the echoing emptiness of my own house. The contrast was stark, almost unbelievable. After the story, Lily drifted off to sleep, her small hands still clutching mine. I gently tucked her into bed, a warmth spreading through my chest. This was what family felt like. Not obligation, not resentment, but genuine connection. Good night, little one, I whispered, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. As I left the room, Sister Agnes approached, a knowing smile on her face. You have a gift, Margaret, she said softly. The children adore you. I shrugged, a little embarrassed. I just enjoy their company, I replied. It's nice to be needed. You are needed, Margaret, Sister Agnes repeated, her voice firm. More than you know. She handed me a stack of folded drawings, brightly colored and slightly crumpled. These are for you, she explained. The children wanted to thank you for the stories. I unfolded the drawings one by one, each a vibrant depiction of scenes from the fairy tales I'd read. Princesses in shimmering gowns, dragons breathing fire, brave knights on horseback. They were childishly rendered, yet full of heart, and a lump formed in my throat. They're beautiful, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Later that evening, sitting in my small but cozy room, I looked around at the few possessions I'd brought with me. A framed photo of my late husband, a worn copy of my favorite novel, a small watercolor set I hadn't touched in years. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was more than enough. I opened the small wooden box that held the letters from the children and added the latest batch of drawings. Each one was a testament to the joy I'd found in this unexpected place, a tangible reminder of the love I was receiving. I thought about Eleanor and Julian, about the wedding invitations I'd received a few weeks earlier, the elaborate script, the embossed crest, the ostentatious venue. It all felt so distant now, like a faded dream. I'd sent a simple card, a brief note wishing them well, but I hadn't felt any real connection to the event. My life had moved on, had blossomed in a direction I never could have imagined. The phone rang, startling me. It was Eleanor. Her voice was strained, hesitant. Mother, she began, we received your card. Are you sure about this? I could hear the unspoken question hanging in the air. Are you sure about missing my wedding? I'm very sure, Eleanor, I replied gently. I'm happy here. I've found a place where I belong. There was a long silence on the other end, broken only by Eleanor's soft sniffles. But we thought you'd want to be there, she finally said, her voice choked with emotion. For my big day, I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Your big day is about you and Julian, I said softly, and I'm happy for you both. But I have my own life now, Eleanor, my own happiness to consider. What about the trust fund? She blurted out, the question hanging in the air, raw and exposed. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken resentments. I had set up a trust fund for Eleanor years ago, intending to give it to her on her wedding day. It was a significant sum, enough to give her and Julian a comfortable start. But things had changed. My priorities had shifted. The trust fund, I echoed, feigning surprise. Oh, Eleanor, I completely forgot to tell you. I've made some adjustments. My voice was calm, steady. Despite the tremor of nerves running through me, I could practically hear Eleanor holding her breath. I've decided to donate the majority of it to St. Agnes, I continued, my voice gaining strength. They need it more than you do. They're my family now. There was a gasp on the other end, followed by a choked sob. But Mother Eleanor stammered, her voice laced with disbelief. That's not fair. Life isn't always fair, Eleanor. I replied, a sense of quiet resolve settling over me. I've learned that the hard way, but I've also learned that happiness isn't found in material possessions, but in the love and connection we share with others. And that's something I have in abundance here. I ended the call before she could respond, a wave of relief washing over me. I looked round my small room, at the children's drawings, at the framed photo of my husband. I was home. I was finally home. The evening air was cool and crisp as I stepped out onto the small balcony overlooking the garden. The scent of roses filled the air, and the sound of crickets chirping created a soothing symphony. In the distance, I could see the twinkling lights of the city, a reminder of the life I had left behind. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, a sense of peace settling over me. I had found my haven, my purpose, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The soft glow of the nightlight painted the room in gentle hues, a stark contrast to the sterile white of the hospital room that had been my world just weeks ago. I tucked the edge of the blanket around a small, sleeping form beside me, a little girl named Lily who'd arrived at St. Agnes just yesterday. She's a quiet one, Sister Agnes had said, her voice kind, still adjusting. Poor dear. I understood that feeling all too well. I smoothed Lily's hair, and a wave of unexpected peace washed over me. This quiet, shared room, the soft breathing of the children around me, it was a stark contrast to the silence of my own home. A silence punctuated only by the hollow echo of Eleanor and Julian's indifference. Are you sure you're all right, Mom? Eleanor had asked. Her voice tight with something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't concern. Not really. Julian and I have that dinner reservation, you know. And I did know. I knew how much that fancy restaurant meant to them. How important appearances were. More important, it seemed, than their own mother wasting away in a hospital bed. Go on, dears, I'd rasped, my voice thin and weak. Don't let me keep you. I pushed those memories away, focusing on the gentle rhythm of Lily's breathing. Here, at St. Agnes, I wasn't just a burden, a sick old woman taking up space. Here, I was needed. I spent my days helping Sister Agnes in the nursery, rocking babies, reading stories, and offering a comforting presence to children who, like me, had known hardship. You have such a calming influence, dear Sister Agnes, had told me just this morning, her eyes crinkling at the corners. The children are drawn to you. Her words had warned me more than any medicine ever could. They filled a void I hadn't realized existed, a void left by my own children's absence. I remembered the letter I'd left for Eleanor and Julian, the one explaining my decision. I hadn't poured out my hurt and anger, hadn't accused them of neglect. Instead, I simply stated my intention to spend my remaining days at St. Agnes, a place where I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. I'd left the letter on my bedside table, knowing they'd find it after their dinner, after their meticulously planned evening. I imagined their surprise, perhaps even their confusion. Would they understand? Would they even care? The truth was, I didn't care anymore. I had found a different kind of family here, a family bound not by blood, but by shared experience and mutual respect. The children, with their bright eyes and infectious laughter, had breathed life back into my weary soul. They didn't see a sick old woman. They saw someone who cared, someone who listened, someone who could offer a hug and a kind word. And that, I realized, was more valuable than any forced visit or obligatory phone call. I looked around the room, at the sleeping faces illuminated by the nightlight. The air was filled with the quiet murmurs of dreams, the soft rustle of blankets. A small hand reached out and grasped my finger. I looked down and saw Lily's eyes fluttering open. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice small and hesitant. I had a bad dream. I smiled and gently squeezed her hand. "It's all right, sweetheart," I murmured, pulling the blanket higher around her. "I'm here." And in that moment, as I held her close, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had found my purpose, not in the hollow holes of my empty house, but in the loving embrace of this unlikely family. My revenge, if it could be called that, wasn't about inflicting pain. It was about finding joy, about creating a life filled with purpose and meaning, a life my own children had chosen not to share. And in that quiet room, surrounded by the gentle breathing of sleeping children, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known I was capable of. I closed my eyes, a genuine smile gracing my lips for the first time in what felt like forever. The inheritance, the house, the life I'd built, they could have it all. I had found something far more precious. I had found my home,